Absolutely.
We all love Sam Amick from The Athletic. It's NBA season is here. Sam is back with us. Sam, good morning.
Good morning, gentlemen. Jay, always love connecting with you. Bobby Gerald on air. I love it, man. Good to hear your voice.
Right on, Sam. How are you?
I'm good, brother. I'm good. Glad to be with you guys.
Good.
Yeah, we saw you just wrote about the defending champs and trying to run it back in some sorts of their version, trying to build a dynasty. What did you learn about kind of uncovering what's going on with the Denver Nuggets?
Yeah, it's funny. Last week, full disclosure, I went to Colorado not to cover the defending champions, but to chase James Harden because the Sixers had training camp in Fort Collins, Colorado. But while I was there, it only felt right to stop by Nuggets Media Day and pay a little respects to the champs. I talked to GM Calvin Booth for quite a while and honestly really enjoyed getting his kind of deep perspective on their off season, where they're coming from, where they're going. The short version is, in the summers, you guys know they took, a hit when they lost Bruce Brown to Indiana. Contractually, there was really no prayer of them holding on to Bruce, and he was so good in their title run that it seemed like the conversation about the Nuggets in the summer quickly became like, oh, they got worse and they didn't have a replacement for Bruce. So Calvin talks at length about, it's not real sexy, but honestly, it's pretty substantive about, their plan to kind of refill the cabinet through the draft. They're really high on Christian Brown, who had some good moments in the playoffs. They've got a bunch of older draft picks. Basically, their optimistic vision is that it's kind of a market inefficiency, right? Where if you can draft well with older draft picks that come in and support this core that is obviously really special, then maybe people will forget that you didn't go out and sign some high profile free agent last summer. So they fully expect to be in the mix again, but even beyond repeating was kind of interesting perspective on the idea that, hey, if we don't repeat this year, what if we get 2 out of the next 4? Like they've got a really, really long view here, and really because of how great Jokic and Jamal Murray are.
Yeah, I liked Hunter Tyson in Summer League. He really looked good. I thought he was good at Clemson last year. He's one of those older rookies that you talk about. He could be a sneaky guy that could come in there and get some run. They had a Julian Strawther from Gonzaga and Jalen Pickett from Penn State. Definitely fit into that mold. But what do you think about where I think their weakness is kind of at the 1-2 spot, maybe coming off the bench where you're looking at like Reggie Jackson, Justin Holiday, guys like that?
Yeah, I'll be honest. I love talking to Calvin. That was probably the one part of the conversation. And listen, if I am wrong, then I'll eat crow and he'll look like a genius. But like at one point, and it's in the story, he literally said, I could see Reggie being 6th man of the year this season. And essentially talked about how Reggie's resilient. There have been times in his past couple of years where people thought he was left for dead when he was with the Pistons. Then he came back and averaged almost 17 a game for the Clippers. So, that is, I agree, Bobby, like a real question area where, the idea of Reggie being that good, I would be pretty suspect of. I'm sure he'll be, an impact player, but, I think that's a fair thing to point out and say it's a little bit of weakness.
Yeah. And then I guess Peyton Watson might be a guy who now steps up and finds his way somehow close to the rotation or near the rotation. Did you hear anything about Peyton Watson?
He mentioned him in passing, and I mean, Christian Brown is the number one priority.
Okay.
In fact, I think, it was basically the choice. So, for example, they looked at Torrey Craig really hard in the summer. He's 32, a vet, has been with the Nuggets before. That potentially could have been a Christian Brown replacement, right? And what I did think was so interesting about what Calvin explained was that they don't want to get on the hamster wheel of every year just going out to get the best of the worst free agents that are left at that price point, because they've got 3 max players. And so that with the way the CBA is constructed, your options are going to be limited. So rather than go get a Torrey Craig, it was prioritize Christian Brown, to a lesser degree, prioritize guys like Peyton Watson. But it was kind of fun. Calvin's such an interesting dude, man, because he's a former King. I actually covered him for a minute when he was in Sacramento, and he's like so understated and mild mannered, but he's got a ton of confidence. And literally at one point said, He goes, I'm telling you, man, like, I think we might have gone 5 for 5 in the draft the last 2 years. And if that's true, that'll be, a major factor in how good they are. And the last thing real quick, guys, that I loved was, he's a student of the game, and he spends a lot of time studying some of these dynasties. And he talked about the Spurs and the fact that, generally speaking, when you get your core, you got Tim Duncan, Manu Ginobili, Tony Parker, he had basically admitted that drafting becomes a whole lot easier, even if it's, late in the first round, that you now know the exact type of skill set that you need to complement the core. The hard part is getting that core. And obviously the Nuggets have it. And he feels like his job now is just to make the right picks along the way and stay where they are.
Sam Amick from The Athletic joining us. Sam, you said your intention was to go out there and figure out a little bit more about James Harden. What is the latest with him in Philadelphia and his future?
Yeah, it's wild. I mean, honestly, it was one of the more memorable road trips. Admittedly, it didn't really get reflected in the coverage. Maybe it will down the road, but like, I go to Fort Collins. It was a little surreal. You're kind of looking around. It's a city I'd never been to. And first day of practice, I asked Nick Nurse really directly, like, Nick, I just got to know, like, why are you here? Why am I here? Why are we in Fort Collins? And the answer was pretty interesting, and not necessarily James Harden related. And I'll get to your question, Jay. Apologies, I'm giving the long answer, but like, it's almost Joel Embiid related. So he wanted his team to train in elevation. He wanted his team to be near the Denver Nuggets to remind them that they did not win the title last year, and the Nuggets did. I don't know if you guys saw, he also, by the way, took his team to go out dinner with Deion Sanders in Boulder on this trip. And there's video of this. Deion Sanders, with a room full of Sixers, literally looks at Joel Embiid and says, man, there's too many NBA stars in this league these days who don't want the smoke and who keep ducking the big matchups. That was obviously a Jokic Embiid comment. Embiid has not played in Denver since 2019. Wow. So Nick Nurse is like trying to get his team going, but meanwhile, the James Harden saga is a massive distraction. I think they're managing it pretty well, but it's still a distraction. He is playing ball right now with the organization with the hopes that the Clippers can finally get a trade over the finish line. They are scouring the league, basically trying to get more draft capital because Daryl Morey, the Sixers president of basketball ops, has a threshold and a very hard request for a trade, that he would be willing to agree to, that the Clippers just haven't been able to meet. So it's still a waiting game. And James, has, I think, decided for now anyway, to not go off the reservation, so to speak, because, he thinks it would only make things worse. Now I'll say he hasn't played in the first 2 preseason games. They played Monday at Brooklyn. That'll be the next time that we see, is he going to get on the floor? Now, Embiid hasn't been playing either, so that's the kind of out for the Sixers, is that it's not just the James thing. But it's still a prickly, uncomfortable dynamic between James and the Sixers for sure.
Yeah, that's wild. From him saying he'll never play for Daryl Morey, and then then showing up at camp even though he misses the media day. It just always seems like there's something with James Harden that makes it a little bit of a circus. So what do you think the Clippers, would there be any players involved in a deal like that? I mean, who would the Sixers actually want off of that Clippers roster that's worth a darn?
Oh, it's a big salary, $35 million. But the one player of note, and that really truly is the only one that matters and is part of the discussions, is Terrence Mann.
Okay.
But not necessarily, and this is the hard part of pro sports, right? Like, not as a player, like really as an asset, so to speak, which I always hate calling players that. So the Sixers plan, either in a 3-team scenario or maybe a separate trade if they got something done, if the Clippers eventually put Terrence Mann in the deal, would be to flip Terrence for another first-round pick. Now, either the Clippers can do that separately, give that pick to the Sixers, whatever the machinations are. Mm-hmm. The Sixers want, they want more picks, and they don't want the picks that are tied to the Clippers, because they have a pretty strong belief that the way Steve Ballmer, the Clippers owner, is wired, like he's not ever going to let the Clippers be bad.
Yep.
And so as a result, those picks are not really all that valuable. So the Terrence Mann thing is a key factor in the discussions, because then if the Clippers got something done and the Sixers got what they wanted, I don't know who Philly would go after, but the plan from there for sure would be then you take all that stuff that you got and you go find a James Harden replacement.
Gotcha.
And you turn that into a high-level player.
Yeah, I'd say you're going to have to give me a bunch of picks. I want Brandon Boston. I want KJ Martin. I mean, I don't even know how many other young guys there are in that team because the Clippers are just so veteran-laden. So, yeah, Terrence Mann,
right.
Some of those guys to throw in there. Always interesting with James Harden.
Yes.
It's an adventure.
Yeah. Sam, I don't know if you have anything currently. You always kind of have your eyes and ears on the Kings. So far, Bob and I have talked about their preseason, kind of uninspiring at the moment, but not too much into that. Anything you're keeping your eye on regarding the Sacramento Kings?
Yeah, I mean, I just read kind of the latest comments from Mike Brown from last night. The Sasha Vezenkov situation or subplot or storyline, whatever you want to call it, is interesting. You know what I mean? Like, you've got this guy that celebrated and so accomplished overseas, and such a big life decision to choose to come over here in the organization, as you guys know, spent a lot of time and resources to go, connect with him as a person and paint the picture of what, he could bring to the program. So he makes this big jump later in his career. He's 27, 28, whatever he is. He's not a young guy. And then it's kind of another reminder, like, listen, the NBA is the NBA. Like, they clearly didn't make him any promises. Mike Brown said last night that part of their discussion was with Sasha, like, you're going to have to earn it. So, to see it go from some of the excitement / hype of the off season towards Sasha to the, kind of cold glass of water in the face training camp experience where Mike says he's not sure he's in the rotation and really still is saying that, even after starting him last night. That's probably front and center. And it's funny, Bobby had great perspective earlier. I was listening about defense and the fact that it's half the game and Kings fans might be a little guilty of glossing over it. And it's very true. And, I knew going into camp that Mike Brown had concerns about Sasha's defense. And the tough thing about Sasha is that as talented and fantastic a player as he seems to be, if you're looking at the whole entire operation, his skill set is adding something or bringing something that the Kings already had in abundance, which is scoring and shooting. Now you can never have too much, but in terms of where they were weak last year, that didn't do much to shore up, what kind of who they were. And so that's what makes it interesting, because once you add the Trey Lyles and the Davions and the JaVale McGee's and the rotation starts getting, pretty short, I could see this being a pain point for a while between Sasha and the Kings, and I'm curious to see where it goes.
Yeah, I think right now probably Chris Duarte and Sasha seem like they're in a competition for maybe who's the 10th man, on this roster, and it will be interesting to see how it shakes out. I'm sure Duarte has some people that enjoy, or that really remember him in college and what he was able to do, and I thought he was much better as a rookie than he was last year, where he obviously took a step back with the Pacers. So it will be interesting to see. And, Terrence Davis is gone, but he was kind of a wild card for the Kings. I mean, he came in and gave him some good minutes on some different nights. And I just wonder if Duarte, will be able to have that kind of an impact on the team or not. And I certainly understand what you're saying there about Sasha kind of duplicating what the Kings are already good at. I mean, Keegan Murray, Harrison Barnes, Kevin Huerter, all these guys are kind of all the same type of player.
I mean, and this is not Sasha's kind of, preference or priority, but I mean, his presence, I think about a guy like Kevin Huerter, who had a tough first round or playoff performance against the Warriors. You talk about motivating a guy like Kevin to make sure that you perform well enough to hold on to your spot. Having a guy like Sasha around is going to do that for you, and all the way down the line. Harrison, Keegan, Sasha can play three spots. The Duarte point is an interesting one, because I had heard that Mike was big on Chris coming in, that he liked what he potentially would bring. And then last night, again, reading his comments, like I did in the B, it was like he's highlighting Chris's defense right out the gate, saying that people felt him. And you can't really blame Mike. I mean, Mike's trying to take this thing to the next level. And again, to Bobby's point, it really did get glossed over. The defense was really strong or solid in the playoffs, but it was atrocious for most of the regular season. So if they're going to be a better team, they've just got to get better on that end.
Yeah, and I think some of that in the playoffs was because outside of Looney, the Warriors just aren't a big team. Like I thought the Warriors play small, an awful lot last year. So yeah, I don't know. It's always an adventure though, right, Sam? I mean, in Sacramento, it's I just hope the fans will be all right if, instead of fighting for the third spot or the fourth spot, it's more like fighting for a play-in spot or something like that, which, I'm not saying that that's what's going to happen, but I think
it's possible.
I think it's very possible, especially when you consider New Orleans and Oklahoma City and the jumps that they may take, given that Chet Holmgren's now a part of the mix in Oklahoma City and given that Zion is healthy, that remains to be seen if he can stay healthy for the whole season. But he's a game changer for the Pelicans. Last year, they had the best record in the league when he went out.
100%. And I mean, the disclaimer I'll give to maybe, let's see, Bob, you're worse than me. I feel like I always get on these airways and give Kings fans, the stuff to cry about. But like the reality is for most fan bases in the Western Conference, what you just said also applies. You've got to be ready to be top 3, top 4, or you got to be ready to be fighting for the play-in. Like that really is true for, maybe half the teams in the West. You like Portland, Houston, I'm looking at it here. Okay, not expecting a ton in terms of top tier play from those teams. The Jazz are talented, but maybe in that tier a bit. The Spurs are going to be fun with Wemby, but there's not that many teams that aren't going to be looking at like 3 through 10. It's just the truth. And so it is kind of what the NBA wanted, right? Not to go too macro, but my goodness, you talk about the regular season mattering again, between the parity in the West, the player participation policy, the awards incentives where you got to play 65 5+ games to get an award. We are going to have, I think, for sure, a higher level of competition in the regular season.
All right, I know we're up against it here. Before we get you out of here, Sam, I was saying that it seems to me watching some of the preseason that there's almost like a quickening going on in the NBA with talent and the way some of these kids are playing and performing in the preseason. I've been super impressed with, obviously, Wembanyama, Chet Holmgren. Asar Thompson looked great the other night. Cam Whitmore for the Rockets looked fantastic the other night. Have you had a chance to see some of these rookies, and what do you think about this rookie class potentially being one of the best we've ever seen?
I haven't, admittedly. I need to get on it. I mean, I saw, I was at Wembanyama's debut in Vegas. That was obviously a little faded, didn't go very well. He's been much, much better since. I was kicking myself the other night because it's almost like you gotta wake up to the fact that it's not just watching the elite teams anymore, that you do have elite talent with some of these, quote unquote lower level teams. Although, like you said, OKC is going to be dangerous. But I mean, I love it that Holmgren Wembanyama matchup. They had history where they went against each other in international play, and it has been like the two guys for a long time. So you kind of saw that game and thought to yourself, like, man, that could be the type of thing that we got to tune in for the next 20 years. Like, that's pretty fantastic. And, the idea that the league has it on the front end like that with the young guys and the back end with the LeBrons and the Stephs and the Durant and players of that nature, it's a pretty good time in the association right now.
Absolutely. I love it. I'm fired. I can't wait for the seasons to start. I'm already going crazy watching so much basketball.
I know, you're watching everything.
I love it.
Sam, as you go, what are you working on next? What's the next thing we can expect from you at The Athletic?
I'm actually LA bound tomorrow. Kind of a surprise trip that admittedly was the gravitational pull of Giannis and Damian Lillard being together. They play the Lakers on Sunday. And that kind of speaks to what we just hit on, is like, I can't even keep up with this stuff right now. Like, I was gonna hang in town. I was gonna go to Kings Warriors on Sunday, And then I'm looking at the calendar and the schedule, and it's like, man, I'm not going to see Milwaukee doesn't come back to Northern California or come to Northern California until like mid-March. So, yeah, like no offense to the Milwaukee folks. I typically don't go that far during the regular season. So I'm going to see them this weekend. It's Lakers-Warriors Friday, and I know it's preseason, but that'll be fun to see a little rematch of the playoff matchup they had. So doing the LA thing for a couple days, and then I assume that I'll see you gentlemen next Thursday at Kings Jazz would be the next thing on the calendar.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Sam, we look forward to that. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to talking to you again next week.
You got it. Thanks, guys. Have a great day.
Sam.
All right. He is dialed in. I mean, that's cool. And
he's great.
And I love just even,